Joining us now from Abuja, he's a security analyst, Kabiru Adamu. Kabiru, it's good to have you join us this morning. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mike. My pleasure to be with you.
All right. Now, when it comes to the fights or war against terror, the government has given assurance to Nigerians that they have won the war against terror. And in fact, there were times where there were calls for commendation for the Nigerian army. No doubt, bombings and all of that had not taken place the way it used to be. But when we still hear of suicide bombings here and there, how concerned is Nigeria, or should Nigerians be, and how much of the winning of this war have we done?
Well, the situation on ground tells us that the war has not been won. Yes, in every war there is propaganda, and depending on who controls the media, you would want to sell the story that you are winning the war. And I think it has a psychological as well as support for the military that are fighting out there when you keep on drumming that sound that you won the war. But the reality on ground tells us that there are still elements of the two groups, actually, the one called Jamaat al-Sin al-Dawat wal Jihad, popularly called Boko Haram, which as you mentioned in the introduction, uses mainly young teenage girls to carry out attacks against soft targets. And then the other one called the Islamic State in West Africa province, which over the last few months we've seen it specifically targeting military and sometimes other security forces formation, mainly in Borno State. So these two elements, both the ISWAP, Islamic State in West Africa province, and Boko Haram, they're still very much active in especially Borno State and some parts of Yobe State. However, like you rightly mentioned in your introduction, we need to commend the military for the campaign it's waging against this terrorist. Significant successes have been achieved, and I'm hugely impressed with the strategy. Over time, in the last 2 years, we've seen a change in the strategy by the military, especially the Nigerian Air Force. We've seen a synergy of intelligence and the operational warfare itself, the types of attacks they carry out in the field. So those are successes. Then even their ability to read the situation on ground and then change their strategy, we've seen improvements in that regard. Perhaps in the course of the discussion we'll talk about other areas that I would say need to be looked into for that the war to be won, quote and unquote.
And that's my cue for my next question. What areas do you think would need to close the gap in the war against terror?
Essentially, the war on terror is, especially this type that we're facing in Nigeria, is one of ideology. So we have always said it, we that are not government security forces, that you cannot win a war alone using, military warfare. The UN, almost all international, bodies have introduced what is called the countering violent extremism mechanism, and this mechanism has been embraced by Nigeria. Unfortunately, what we are seeing in Nigeria is that funding is not being provided for those elements under the countering violent extremism mechanism. There are 4 elements under that mechanism. One of them is de-radicalization. So if we agree that this war is one of ideology, how do you take out that ideology from the affected region? How do you sell a better ideology to the people of that region so that they now believe that what Boko Haram and what ISWAP is selling to them is a wrongful ideology, and they don't embrace it? Now you do that, you deny these terrorists from further recruitment. But as long as they have the capacity to recruit more, then the war will continue. The second element is counter-radicalization. So people have already been radicalized. How do you now change their mind to abandon, this terrorist ideology? In this regard, I think the Nigerian government is doing slightly better than the first one I mentioned, even though it needs to be expanded. We know that there are 1 or 2 programs that is being pursued by especially the Office of the National Security Advisor and perhaps 1 or 2 other agencies of government. The other one is good governance. How do you improve the living standard of the people in that?
Curious as to your statement that it depends on where you're looking at it from, that reports as to victories over the Boko Haram, well, the Nigerian military is telling us it's gaining grounds against them. But let's even talk about the issue of the multinational joint task force across Chad, Niger, and of course Mali. How effective do you think this collaboration is so far in the war against terror?
Indications are that it's been quite effective. The mandate that it had was to block the border area, between Chad, Niger, and to an extent Cameroon. So right now we are aware that there are ongoing military operations, between I think about 8,700 forces involved in that. The four countries as well as, some other partners and international allies as well, the US, UK, France, supporting that offensive. Now, from what we know and what we've seen on ground, it has been able to secure that border to the extent that supplies that were coming to the terrorists have been completely cut off, which means that some of the attacks that we're seeing right now by the terrorists are one of survival. They are actually now coming inwards to look for, basic necessities, including fuel supplies, food supplies, and other types of supplies just to sustain, the insurgency. So to that extent, I think the multinational joint task force has been quite successful in the military aspect of its operations.
All right, Kabiru, talk to us about recruitment. It's quite concerning that they are still able to recruit young girls and young boys to carry out suicide bombing. How is that thriving when the military has told Nigerians that they have captured everywhere and their surveillance is also everywhere?
Well, I think that's an overstatement of the truth. All the territories have been recaptured, but to say you've captured everywhere, I think it's a fallacy. The reality is that the two groups I mentioned, Jamaat al-Ahli al-Dawat wal-Jihad, headed by Bakar Shekau, and then ISWAP, headed by Abu Musab al-Barnawi, they still have presence in some parts of Borno State in particular. And frankly, even us that are in the private sector, I run a business consulting firm, and I work extensively in the Northeast. You hear chatter from people living within those communities of the cluster of locations where these two groups are operating from. So to say that the intelligence is effective, I think is a big fallacy. Actually, my point, and I cannot overemphasize this point, we need to improve the efficiency of the intelligence gathering mechanisms that both the military and then the civilian intelligence departments are working with. By this, I mean the synergy between the military, the DSS, and then the several other components. Let's not forget that we have an organization whose mandate it is to collect foreign intelligence, and we know that these groups have some foreign support. For Boko Haram, Jamaat al-Ahli wal-Jihad, it's likely coming from some parts of Mali, and then for ISIS, it's likely coming from Libya, the ISIS wing in Libya. So what is that foreign intelligence component of the Nigerian Security Department doing to support this war by the military? So we need to see a synergy between all of these bodies. Now it is only that synergy that would help the military in carrying out that campaign. Now, and to back to your question about the recruitment of young girls, from what we know, they are exploiting economic, cultural, and psychological means to recruit these girls. And then the fourth element is also coercion. Sometimes they forcefully ask these girls to go and deploy these bombs, some with or without their knowledge. Sometimes there may be somebody holding the trigger, and then they just send the young girl either with whatever it is. It could be a food flask, it could be a bag, it could be anything that she's holding, and then she just goes there, and then the second person or the third person, in the case maybe, detonates the explosive. So there are several elements. Bottom line is this: the Nigerian government needs to take out that ability from the terrorists. And I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation that the only way to do that that is through the de-radicalization effort. Send out a counter ideology that will make people of that location, Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa, know that this, the four tenets upon which these two groups, preach are wrongful interpretation of the scriptures, the Islamic scriptures. And the moment you do that, then you are taking away that capacity for them to recruit and to deploy.
Of course, May 29 is right around the corner. I wonder what the scorecard would look like for you, for this government, in the war against terror.
I think it will be fairly good. In percentages, we'll probably give it up to 70 or 80%, because from the statistics that we keep, we know that there has been a drastic drop in the number of attacks. And if you look at the territory that is being held by the insurgents, it has reduced tremendously.
All right.
There was a time when about 24 local governments were under the control of the terrorists. Right now, no local government is under their control. Then even the ability of the local communities to detect these suicide bombers and reduce the casualty figure in the attacks, it has reduced tremendously.
All right, Kabiru.
What needs to be done is to completely...
Kabiru, thank you very much. Sorry, that's the much time can permit us right now. Thank you for talking to us on this. Thank you. We look forward to other times.
My pleasure, Mike, and take care.
And Ngozi, thank you.